Hi, and welcome to this video tutorial for Prague 1210 Rapid Application Development. In this video, we're going to look at registering new users and including them in a role as well. So if we take a look at the interface, you'll see that I've added these two radio buttons for yes and no, creating an administrator. So when we register, we need to take a look at that list of radio buttons and see if the yes button is selected. And if we've selected yes, we're going to set up a new role and register our user in that role, along with creating the new user object. So we'll need to keep our code here that creates our new user. And we'll just put in a little if statement that tests that radio button to see if we want to create an administrator or not. So we'll look at our radio button list for the admin status and find out what is selected. And if they've selected yes, then that means we're going to create the role information as well. Now, most likely we don't want to do all the role information unless the user was created successfully. So I'm going to take my little if statement and move it down here into the else portion. I'll just realign my code a bit. There we go. So only if our user was created successfully do we want to try to sign them up in the role. In order to get the user into the role, what I'm going to do first is see if the role already exists in our role store. So just like when we were working with users, we need a user store and user manager. Now when we're working with roles, we need a role store and a role manager as well. So we'll create our role store object first. And now we'll create our role manager. Fix up the paste, and now our role store is all set, along with our role manager. I'll give that guy a name here. So just like when we set up for the users, we set up the role manager as well. Now first we need to see if the role exists, because if it doesn't exist, we can't put a user into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to see if the role exists, and if it doesn't exist, then we're going to create the new role for administrators. I'll just pause the video while I type out this next part. So here's my if statement to find out if the role of administrator exists or not. And if it doesn't exist, then I'm going to use my role manager to create the new role. So we'll create a new role. The type is identity role, and we'll give it the name administrator. Now just like when we were creating the new user, we have an option to capture the result object to see if the new role was created or not. So we still have this identity result object that we can use to find out whether or not the role creation was successful. Moving on from that, now that we know our role will be created, we can now take the user that we've created up here and add them to the role. So right in this else block, because remember, we're only adding the user to the role if the user was successfully created in the first place. So we'll take our user manager object and add user to role. We specify our user's ID. So we've got our new user object that we're adding to the role. We have to pass their ID value. And the second parameter is what role we're adding that user to. So because this is just a string, be careful of your spelling when you're doing this. And just like any other action against the user store or role store, we can save the result of that as well. So we've got three possible failure spots here: creating the new user, creating the new role, or adding the user to the role. So before we log in, it's a good idea to make sure that all three of those things pass, and you can do that either by putting this code into a try block or by using if statements to test the success of these result objects. So at this point, when the user gets logged in, the role information becomes part of the user and goes along through as part of the authentication. So when we get over to welcome.aspx, our user identity object will know what roles the user is part of.